Welcome to Young Money with Tracy Bissett, the advice show for young millionaires in the making. It's time for some $1 Million Straight Talk with Tracy, President and Chief Financial Fitness Trainer at Bissett Financial Fitness. Each week, Tracy's going to tell you what you need to know now at the beginning of your earning curve. Basic and advanced financial concepts made clear, healthy money habits and the missteps to avoid, and all the stuff that you can do to set yourself up for a future of fantastic financial freedom. Ready to lace up and start this week's financial fitness training? Let's do it, Tracy.
Welcome to the Young Money Podcast. I'm really excited today. We have a very special guest, Liz Lajoie. Welcome to the show, Liz.
Hi, nice to be here.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. So Liz is the Zen Money Strategist and CFO and the founder of the Zen Money Initiative, which helps mission-driven entrepreneurs master their finances and grow thriving businesses. With nearly 2 decades of experience in financial management and strategic business development for established multi-million-dollar firms, Liz is a sought-after expert and host of Zen Money Monday, a weekly show exploring profitable business building for mission-driven entrepreneurs. She has been featured on Women-Inspired TV and published as an international best-selling author from Zero to Zen, Secret Keys to Nurturing Your Numbers and Finding Financial Flow, and Zen Money Map, Charge Your Worth, Pay Yourself First, and Fund Your Wildest Dreams. She lives in northern New Hampshire with her husband and 2 children. So welcome again, Liz.
It's really nice to have this conversation with you today, Tracy.
Well, I'd love it if you can start by telling us in your own words what your business looks like and kind of what a day-to-day looks like, aside from kind of the formal bio that I read.
Sure. My team and I these days work with entrepreneurs and small business owners, primarily in the online space, helping them master their money, make more of it, and ultimately develop a good strategic plan that works both in their business from a business growth standpoint, but also make sure that they're mapping to their personal life and their personal pocketbook the way that they want to, because sometimes we can get very excited about trajectory in our business building and not necessarily have a financial plan in place that also remembers to, pay us and put food on the table. So we do that in the cloud. We do long-term financial management support services, including bookkeeping, CFO level strategy support, tax coordination, that kind of work. And then we also do training to help people develop a plan and a strategy that they can then take and work for themselves. So I am a big believer that when we're dealing with our money stuff, there are 3 major legs that we need to be paying attention to in our financial house. And that's our day-to-day financial management, what I call the ticky-tacky work, which is, keeping records and making sure that we have everything we need to get our taxes done, but also taking that and utilizing it from a strategic standpoint, analyzing it, seeing where we can make tweaks and changes to better ourselves and our business. And then ultimately the mindset behind all of it, because as you know, and a lot of your listeners probably experience, it's very easy to want to put this portion of our life on the back burner or rabbit hole around it. And I know you talk about this a lot. And it's so we can't not talk about the mindset piece as well, because it's not just about doing the things, it's making sure that you feel great in the process and have the tools you need to be really confident around your financial decisions.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for really breaking that out for us. I think you really hit on some great things, which I know we're going to dive into. So I'm looking forward to that. If we can just look back into your past a little bit and you think about your background, what would you say are some themes or some core traits that kind of reemerged consistently as you were creating your success in terms of key success factors or things you think you do well that have led you to where you are today?
I think that's a great question. And it's a really interesting one because as an entrepreneur or business owner, I think many of us have different traits that support us. For me, I think being flexible and being able to see opportunity and take advantage of it has really helped me. I think I have the ability to see issues or problems and see a very clear path to cleaning them up or clearing them up. And so that definitely, over the various jobs that I've held over the years, I think that's been really helpful for me, in addition to being a lifelong learner. I think if you're going to get into any kind of business stage, whether that's buying into a business or starting one yourself, understanding that it's an ongoing learning process. And if you don't love learning and love challenging yourself, it may not be for you. So I think being able to do all those things and, basically being willing to do hard things has been useful for me. I don't like to back down from a challenge, which I think helps.
Very good. And certainly none of these are novel, but I think that anybody who's listening, who puts one or all of them into practice in their own lives will generate success as well. I love it. Being flexible, seeing the opportunity and taking advantage of it. A lot of people see opportunity, but they don't grasp it and they don't actually take a hold of it. And certainly the lifelong learning piece. I know firsthand as an entrepreneur that I learn how to do new things pretty much every day. And if I didn't like that, I should probably get into some other kind of work.
For sure. And I think all of those things are just make for great living too, right? Whether you have an interest in branching out on your own or not, it's something that can be useful to recognize that if we, remind ourselves to challenge ourselves once in a while, life is interesting and generally gets better.
Absolutely. And so whether it's your personal life or you've got a corporate type role, all of that stuff fits, which is fantastic. Now, when you think about your life, I know that you do know a lot about money, but what's something that you can share with us that's been a big financial challenge for you or something you wish you'd known a little bit earlier in your life?
Well, when I was raised by two successful professional people. My parents are in the medical profession. And I think that they thought that we were going to learn about money and how it worked through osmosis. I think a lot of people can relate to that. So there wasn't a whole lot of direct conversation about how it worked and how to use it to your advantage and how not to, go down the debt spiral and things like that. So for me, it was a personal learning curve to figure out how I wanted to do this for myself, in my late teens, early 20s through college, when you go out on your own and start to figure things out. So I wish that I'd known earlier that there had been more education, in a standardized way around, the pros and cons of how you can use money for your advantage. Because I think when you don't have that, it gets very wrapped up in a lot of fear and negativity and sort of, I'm just going to shut it in a drawer because it's this murky gray area. And that certainly happened for me. And I know it does for many of us.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So using it as a tool to help enable you do all of the things that you want to achieve in your life and not really give it so much power and have emotions really attached to it.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's really wonderful. And I've talked a lot about it on the show, but education system here in Canada certainly does not do a good job preparing young adults for what they're going to face. And it sounds like that's the same in the US as well.
I would agree with that 100%. I think that there's an idea, people don't like to talk about it. People don't like to verbalize around sex and they don't like to talk about money. And it's this idea that it's something that kind of gets taken care of in the home. But if in the home there isn't a lot of understanding or clarity, then it just continues to compound.
Absolutely. And we know that most families aren't equipped to be able to teach their children and their other family members about money because they haven't been taught. And so it's nothing to be ashamed of. It's just got to get started talking and open those discussions so that everybody feels more empowered.
Yeah, because I think, and I know you've talked about this in many of your episodes, but this idea of, we all want success around money. We love the idea of some financial nirvana where, we have plenty of cash to roll around in and enjoy our life with. But it's very hard to know how to get from where we are now, especially if you're just starting out and maybe, money is really tight and you feel like you don't have much to save, much less invest. And there's all this language that you don't understand. It can seem like a bridge too far. And the reality is a little bit of understanding, I think, can go a long way to helping you see what you can do, even if it doesn't feel like you're particularly abundant, in terms of cash right now.
Absolutely. And so we're going to shift gears a little bit. There's so many different things that we could talk about with regards to money. We could talk all day. But I want to focus you in today on your book, From Zero to Zen, Keys to Nurturing Your Numbers and Finding Financial Flow. So what was the motivation that led you to create this book?
I had recently moved into working in the online space, starting my own business. Prior to that, I had a variety of positions in already established businesses, including over a decade as a business manager for a local engineering firm where I was the one non-technical partner. And so I went from that arena where I was responsible for managing everything there and had learned quite a lot around how to take care of your money from within inside a business, not just the bookkeeping and not just the sort of external reporting stuff, but actually from a, day-to-day decision-making standpoint. And so I moved into the online world and, started working with people and realized that there wasn't a lot of great information out there. And as I've said, I'm a big learner. My brain is happy when I'm giving it information. And so I realized there's not a lot of books out there that aren't written in very much accounting speak. And for a lot of entrepreneurs who find this whole money conversation, the financial management conversation, a little overwhelming, it doesn't have to be difficult, but it feels very difficult. So I wanted to create something that laid out kind of nuts and bolts of what we need to be doing as business owners, because there are requirements in terms of, record keeping and reporting and tax work, and generally under the heading of bookkeeping that are important. But it's also, how do we manage cash flow, and how do we make sure that you're not paying too much in interest, on a credit card balance, for example. And so the catalyst and motivation for writing the book was to create a tool that allowed me to have this discussion with a wider audience than just the people I was working with on a one-on-one basis at that time. And it just allowed me to, to create a framework for the conversation of this idea of Zen, or Zen Money, which came from knowing that I knew it wasn't difficult and didn't have to be hard, but so many people I was talking to were just shutting down, even starting to consider the conversation. And I wanted to create something that would, people could use to move themselves, from this place of discomfort to really putting a plan in place for themselves that worked better and felt better.
Well, that's fantastic. And most people who start their own businesses do so because they have a wonderful ability to create a new service, a product, but that's what they're passionate about. Most entrepreneurs are not going into business because they are masters of accountant stuff, finance stuff. That's not their skill set. And so most entrepreneurs out there probably feel like you just described in that area of discomfort when it comes to the financial matters of their business. And so I think it's so nice that you created this tool, again, like we've been talking about money as a tool, but your book, to take people from that place of discomfort to something that they can self-guide themselves through, or they can get in touch with you as well. So I think that's wonderful.
Yeah, I think, a lot of times it's such a critical piece of our business. And yet I think we often think that the money is just going to come behind, that if we get out there with a great idea or a great product, or when we get our marketing in place, then, we'll do really well and there'll be cash in the bank and it'll somehow kind of take care of itself. And really, to be successful, we need to do a little bit of stepping into a responsibility role around our numbers and, not necessarily kind of skating past it. So if we can do that in a way that doesn't feel overwhelming, even better.
Well, that's great. And so you mentioned you wanted to create something easy to read, not in kind of a accountant speak or really technical jargon. And so when somebody is starting up a new business, when they're thinking about things from the financial perspective, what would you say would be the first couple things that they should be considering?
Well, I talk about this in both of my books, but I think being aware of where you're at and what stage of business you're at is really important. So when we start out, I talk about this as our business baby, our business teenager, and our business adult. So in the business baby stage, we are putting money into the business, right? If we're tracking the actual flow of dollars, oftentimes that will come from, savings that we've taken that we're going to launch our business with, or, people talk about building a business with credit cards or some other version of loan, that there needs to be money, on hand to start doing the things you need to do to open your doors. And in that phase, your business is not really giving you anything back. You're giving to your business. The next version is your business teenager stage, where maybe the business has grown to a point where you have money coming into the business itself. And hopefully that money is taking care of the expenses within the business, but it's not really giving you anything back, right? It's your business teenager that can go to the fridge, drink out of the carton of milk, but you're not really getting a whole lot from it. And then ideally, we want to get to the business adult stage where money's coming into the business your expenses in your business are taken care of and there's something left over for you. That's what gets to be put in your pocket, whether it's a direct transfer or some other version of, payment to you. And a lot of times I think people want to immediately jump to the business adult phase, and they do that mentally in their head saying, I've got a great idea. I'm getting a little bit of traction. Let's go. And so it can be very hard in the beginning to recognize the flow of money and what automatically and inherently happens within a business, and making sure that they're planning for it. So sometimes people will get caught short because they've, sort of overspent on, things we think we need to run a business, but is actually not required to go out and get clients and do the work. So I think, things to think about if you're starting off are, let's not go too far being in the hole, right? The entire goal here is not to have an expensive hobby. The entire goal is to ultimately have some profit that you can then enjoy yourself. So keeping an eye on your numbers and your spending in particular is a really great place to start in the beginning. And sometimes you feel like you have to do all this spending just to open your doors, and that's not necessarily the case.
So when you're spending like you've just described, that's a loss. And so profit is when your revenues are going to be bigger than what you're spending, for those who are listening. And you may be in your head trying to figure out at what stage is my business. So thanks for highlighting that. I think that's great.
I was just going to say, I think a good rule of thumb is if we're going, oftentimes we have a loss, as you just defined it, in the first year of business. But if we're going further past that, continuing to be in a loss situation, you're continually having to put extra money in the business just to make ends meet or take on extra credit debt or something like that, then that's where we need to stop and have a conversation with ourselves about, is this a really viable business? Are there things we can tweak and change, like pricing strategies and things like that, to help change the cash flow that's happening for you? But if we're not looking at it at all, we often leave money on the table or stay in it for too long and lose more money, or generally wind up not where we want to be financially.
Yeah, that's so true. I've had many conversation with an entrepreneur around, are you really okay working these 60, 80 hours a week or more, not to take any of the money out of the business and actually to be leveraging yourself up? Is that what you envisioned when you started the business? And when you kind of frame it like that, it doesn't feel very good, but it certainly brings everything honestly right to the surface.
For sure. Yeah, and to be honest, a lot of times that is required in the beginning, but it's nice to have a plan to be able to see a milestone and say, all right, I'm willing to put in this work now because I know my plan says that if all goes well and I keep working it and I keep showing up, then by X date, this will turn around, right? And if we don't have that kind of mapped out, we can often go quite a ways, and that's when people end up declaring bankruptcy, and it can really wreak havoc on your personal finances and your personal credit scores and things like that. So I think that it's just, it's a great opportunity, but it's also a place where many new people sort of skip because they're excited in the, we got to get clients to make this work, which is totally true. But if we don't spend a little bit of time looking at our numbers and recognizing where we're at and just checking to see what kind of progress we're making, we can get caught short sometimes. So that's where maintaining your books, whether you're doing it yourself on a spreadsheet or even in a notebook, paying attention to how much is coming in and what you're actually laying out and making sure you're tracking all of that, can be a really great way to keep your brain engaged with the financial part of your business, because we're doing it to put money in your pocket.
It is supposed to bring financial freedom so that you can do things on your terms and on the way you want to live your life. So that is the goal. Now, when people are, you've suggested they look at their numbers, what would be a good frequency for them to look at them?
I know people who are sort of addicted to checking their bank accounts like 3 or 4 times a day. And there's a stress level there. And then there are other people who don't look at it at all. And I think, a standard within your business rule of thumb, from my perspective, is at least once a week. There may be things you want to check more often, like your cash balance, especially if you're trying to pay attention to a check clearing or things are really tight. But at least once a week allows you to look at, do I have any do I have any invoices that are outstanding? That means, do people owe me money and should I follow up with them, to make sure that that money comes in as quickly as possible? Do I owe anybody a contract so that we can start working together and I can get my retainer in hand faster? Who do I owe for bills? These days, especially in the online space, but even with brick and mortar businesses, a lot of times we're doing all of our spending on a credit card, which can be fantastic because, as you know, it gives you an extra 28 days of buffer to pay it off. But it can also be tricky because if that day of payoff hits on a day where something else is going out, that can catch you short. And so that's where looking on it, at least on a weekly basis, allows you to really start to see the flow throughout the month of what's happening in your life. You can do that for yourself on your personal side too, because as the math works the same, right? What dollars are coming in, what dollars are going out, and what's left over. That's the basic financial equation. So if we're just checking on that regularly, doing our due diligence, it can just be 15 minutes a week, 30 minutes a week. If you're doing it regularly, it doesn't take a lot of time to manage your books, really.
Excellent. And so just to really kind of hammer this point home, receivables, so when your clients pay you later, that doesn't necessarily just happen by itself. Sometimes you have to prompt the people to pay you. And I've seen businesses go out of business in as quick as 90 days because they have a bunch of people who are not paying them. And so that can become a problem. Staying on top of your bills and the people you owe money to, really critical. And so I like how you have it in bite-sized pieces, that you do a little bit of work every week and it's not a huge amount every month or every quarter. So that's great. And I'm sure what comes with it is peace of mind.
Yeah, there's a clarity because you're paying attention to it more, and it's not sort of stuck in this chasm of, behind the closet door. I don't know what's really going on there in the dark. And the other benefit of it for anybody who has ever struggled at the end of the year for tax season, where you're spending 4 hours or 4 days collecting receipts and trying to track back and recreate your financial history for an entire year. If you're doing that on a weekly basis and looking at your full numbers, at least monthly, and staying on track of it that way, then that tax season time is so much easier because you already have it all. You've created all of that over your year of paying attention to your numbers anyway.
Fantastic. Now, those are some really great tips about what to start doing if you're going to start off a business. You mentioned a little bit people kind of ignoring their numbers in terms of maybe a misstep. Are there any other either mistakes or missteps you see new entrepreneurs make as they're starting to get a feel for running the business, in particular the financial aspects?
I think one other piece that happens a lot is thinking that somebody else is going to take care of it for you and that you don't have to be engaged with it. So often people will not do anything with, say, day-to-day bookkeeping. And then they'll get to a certain point of revenue and there's enough activity in the business where it's clear that there needs to be something, and then they'll hire a bookkeeper. But they're not experienced enough. The business owner isn't experienced enough to recognize if that bookkeeper is experienced enough to help them.
Right.
There may not be any conversation by the bookkeeper around how the business owner likes to think about their business. So maybe their whole structure, and in accountant speak, chart of accounts, gets set up in a way that is meaningful for them. So oftentimes the bookkeeper will end up taking the information, recording it, which is their job, and creating financial statements, which is their job. And then they'll just send it back to the business owner, and the business owner will look at it. It doesn't reflect how they see and feel about their business. They stick it in a drawer and they just figure, well, at least my taxes, I can use it to get my taxes done. But there is a wealth of opportunity in those numbers if they're set up in a way and they're looked at in a way that's meaningful as to us as the business owner, that can help us be more limber, make decisions more quickly, and make sure that we're leveraging our cash more effectively. And so if we're just pawning it off and assuming someone else is going to understand this better than we are, then we're doing ourselves a disservice. And frankly, at the worst case scenario, that's where fraud happens, where you've given your financial access to somebody who, isn't you and isn't necessarily as connected to what you're trying to do. And we can open ourselves up that way too.
Yeah, unfortunately, I've had too many conversations with entrepreneurs who left it to their bookkeepers to handle. things were a mess. They had to move on to another bookkeeper and kind of remedy past years, to really the extreme that you're talking about, where someone who was supposed to be in control of the money was actually taking it for themselves. And so owner didn't realize for a little while, and that's really bad shock and really not a situation you want to get yourself into. Not only are you potentially out the money, but secondly, your trust in financial professionals really gets shaken, and that's hard to recover from. I think that actually takes longer than just replacing the money.
Absolutely. Like you, I've talked with many people, and we've worked with many people who come to us with I've worked with 4 different bookkeepers. Nobody can really get me what I want. I'm paying for at least monthly reports and a call, but I haven't gotten anything for the last quarter. And my tax person is screaming for it. And they're left trying to be the project manager around all of this financial work, and they don't understand it. And they feel very, in the dark and often taken advantage of. It just feels like it's money going out the door. Somebody's doing something for, $300 to $500 a month, and they have no idea what that bookkeeper is doing because the communication isn't there. So we think that these professionals will guide us. And the reality is they're not trained to do that. A bookkeeper is trained to record your information. An accountant, a tax accountant, is trained to take your information and have a tax conversation with you, or maybe even less than that, just take your numbers and file your taxes for you. And we expect them to come to us and say, hey, I'm seeing something in your business that isn't looking quite right. Here are things you should think about. Well, that is the purview of the CFO. That's the purview of the internal financial management team. And oftentimes when we outsource,
that's one person.
It's one person. In this case, if you're a solopreneur, that should be you. So I want to make sure you have the tools and the information around basic financial management, none of which is difficult. This is 5th grade math, but it's under this cloak of, sort of people don't really understand it. It's kind of like voodoo. But in reality, a little bit of learning can go a long way to making sure that those internal decisions that are based on the numbers that we have to record in bookkeeping, are really working to your advantage. And that's a place that I like to play, because it's not just about recording numbers for the sake of recording numbers. It's what do we do with them once we have them?
Absolutely. And so sometimes people get caught up that I don't know the language. I don't know how to speak a financial language. And so instead of trying and perhaps not knowing the right words, they choose not to ask questions. And so for those who are listening and just starting out, I think that it's really important to just say, did you notice anything in my numbers that you were concerned about or you thought looked a little bit out of the ordinary? Even if you just start there without knowing what the answer is going to be, you can start that dialogue with your financial professional.
Yeah, I think that's a really great tip.
Now, you touched on it a little bit earlier on in our conversation, but I'd love it if you can tell us your definition of money mindset.
Yeah, so this is a term that's thrown out a lot, especially I think in the coaching world and the online entrepreneurial world. And it was very new to me. As I said, I come from this engineering, very analytical background. But I think intuitively I understand it as, our relationship with money. And so we tend to put this emotional layer around it. And as you had said earlier, it really is just a tool. So if we can strip that away, it makes it much easier to manage. But the reality is we all come to the money conversation with long histories, whether we know it or not. We're being taught from a very early age about lessons about what we think money is. And it sticks in our head as a bad thing or a good thing. Maybe our first money memory is of our mom, worrying and tearing her hair out about writing utility checks. It might be, a grandfather giving you $5 when you were 5 years old to go and buy candy, right? Everybody has different histories, but, we build up baggage around this. And I think a lot of it is just out of not understanding fully, how to use it in a positive way. So we see a lot of negativity, and there's a lot of language in our culture around, we don't have enough, there's never enough, things are too expensive, it's difficult to get it, things like that. So for me, money mindset, the concept of it is let's talk about what's coming up while you're looking at your numbers, while you're supposed to be doing it, but you're not doing it, kind of stuff that comes into play.
I think that's great because these things are happening inside your body, whether you notice it or not. And so you're going to have a pit in the bottom of your stomach. You're going to get the headache, whatever it may be for you. And so certainly it's compounded as an entrepreneur because now you've got your personal finances all wrapped up in your business finances. And so the challenges around having a not so positive money mindset can really impact your business.
For sure. We all carry baggage, and when we bring it to our business, it gets magnified 100-fold. And all of those habitual patterns. For example, let's say you grew up in a household where there never felt like there was enough, where, payday would come and it would be gone immediately. And then maybe you were eating ramen noodles for the last few days of the month until the next paycheck comes. And then you've created a successful business. You have all of the pieces in place to be really financially well off, but you find yourself repeating that pattern. You will unconsciously put yourself in a position where you're always short because that's what you unconsciously learned was the way to handle money. So we need to dive into that and tease back those curtains as well, because otherwise you will just continue to keep compounding and recreating those scenarios in different ways within your business.
And so what should entrepreneurs do about it? Even if like the first step to kind of say, I don't know what my money mindset is. How do they assess it?
Well, I think you touched on it in terms of it does show up a lot in our physicality. It will show up in our body like that knot in your stomach, or it feels like a millstone hanging around your neck when you think about looking at your checking account or opening a bank statement. And the first thing to do is to recognize it and just acknowledge, oh my gosh, like I'm feeling this. Right. So if we can recognize it and be wildly curious about it and say, where is this coming from? And track it back a little, it can help clear that up, because even just saying, hey, I see you there. I call it bear brain. This idea that, because it's a fear thing, we think that something's coming to attack us, because it's
Did you say bear?
Bear brain, like a grizzly is coming to eat your face.
Oh,
but it's really just because
it's very unpleasant.
I know it is, but it's that feeling, that visceral fight or flight response that we have when something that we're not familiar with, is presented to us. And oftentimes money, especially as we're building a business, we're having continual new challenges around money that we haven't faced before. So we continually have this very, our adrenaline will kick up and we'll start to feel shaky, or we'll start to feel uncomfortable. And if that's happening and we can recognize it when it happens in our body, it's a triggering point to stop and say, what is really going on here?
Absolutely. And I think that's great. And then from there, you may need some help. So you may work with someone like yourself or another financial professional to just help you over the hurdle of breaking some of those rules you thought were true.
Right.
And some of those patterns and behaviors, and just take it one step at a time. Don't try to change everything at once, and really just look for the small step you can take today. And as you said, that very first step is the acknowledgement and the recognition that, hey, something is going on here.
And be kind to yourself, because everybody deals with these things. If you think that, especially in today's social media world, it seems like it's so easy to, everybody else out there has it perfectly well off and nobody deals with these things. It's not true. Everyone deals with this internally in one way or another. So if we can just be kind to ourselves as we're diving into looking at our numbers, it definitely will help too.
Absolutely. And I always tell all the entrepreneurs that I work with, I guarantee that you know more than you give yourself credit for. You may not know the words I use. You may not explain it in the same way that I do, but you are running a business. And so you do know lots about cash flow, whether you even recognize it, because you're paying your bills and your employees are coming back because they get paid. Yeah. So there's a lot of value in the doing. And so if you can just put this extra layer on top to help bridge the gap of the different language, different concepts, I think entrepreneurs are not as far away as they think they are.
No, they're really not. I have those same conversations as well. And this is a version of Bear Brain that says, I don't know enough to do this. And the reality is there's always many good things. If you have run a viable business, if you were providing services or product, you're doing a lot of things right. And that's important to focus on, as much as, I don't have enough cash in the bank, or I don't have as much as I wanted.
And so that is a great segue to my absolute favorite topic, which is cash flow. I love to talk about cash flow. I love to talk about managing cash flow. And so very simply, what does cash flow mean to you, and how should people be managing it?
I think cash flow is one of those trigger words for people, because we know we want positive cash flow, which to me means we have more money coming in than we have going out. So in an ideal world, we're making more money than we're spending and we have something left over. And again, that basic idea is, let's say we have a bucket of water, right? And the money coming into your business, we're pouring in, and maybe we top off the bucket and you spend out half of it, then you have half of it left to do with something else. You can keep it in the business to do new projects. You can take it out for yourself. Some of it goes to pay taxes, things like that. So we can think of it very literally from a flow standpoint, where it's money coming in, money going out. And if we go too long with more money going out than money coming in, then we're in trouble, right? And we can do something that is currently being called growing broke, which means we're continually using credit or debt tools to continue spending in our business with the hopes and dreams that somehow will catalyst additional income that will get us back on track. But that can be very tricky to manage if we get into that habit. So, positive cash flow from my standpoint is, when you're in a really flush state, let's save some of it, or let's save as much as you can so that you can ride out those downtimes, because we all have them. You can map out your model and say, I'm going to work with 10 clients a month at X dollars, and this is how much I'm going to have coming in. And that might average out over a year, but some months that might be 5 clients, and some months that might be 15 clients.
Mm-hmm.
And so we want to make sure that you're planning for those 5 client months, so that you don't have to worry about, am I going to hit payroll or not? What happens if I don't have enough cash on hand? It also helps to think in this way because it helps you squirrel away money for tax season, for example, because there's nothing worse than getting caught short with a $20,000 tax bill in April or May. And you don't need to do it if we can stay on top of our cash flow. So, the business should be making enough money to cover itself. And the cash flow piece of it is making sure that you're not feeling caught short and paying attention enough to it to be able to map out and plan. A lot of people like to have, say, 3 months of expenses in cash on hand just to cover those ups and downs. Some people like 2 years of expenses. It really comes down to your personal need for security. So some people are much more risk tolerant than others, and knowing that about yourself and kind of understanding your own relationship with money and what kind of person you are, what your style is, can really help you determine those decisions around things like cash flow and how much do I really want to maintain on hand to feel comfortable.
Absolutely. So I think that's a wonderful explanation, little primer on cash flow. I teach part-time, and to my students, I always tell them it's money that comes in, money that goes out, and the timing that it happens, because it doesn't always work out perfectly the way that we want. And so we've got to have that extra cash there in maybe leaner times, or even planned leaner times, because you may be developing some new products or services and you have to take the gas off the existing ones so you can develop them. And so it may even be planned. It's not necessarily all unplanned things that give you that mismatch.
That's a really good point, because, many people want to grow and have different revenue streams and different arms and saying, okay, I'm going to start doing this work, but I can envision bringing this new product online or going, in a whole different direction to add in more income. And anytime we make those shifts, just in the same way that anytime there's a hiring turnover or something else internally happens, it slows us down. And it's not a bad thing. It's actually an indicator of growth. It's like a scab growing over, right?
Yeah.
But if we're aware of it and we can plan for it, it happens so much more easily with less stress.
So if you're the kind of person who doesn't sleep well at night, unless you've got a cushion in the bank, that should be your priority. Making sure you build up the cushion that allows you to sleep, so then you can do your best work.
Exactly.
Are there any misconceptions that you hear from business owners around financial matters that you wanted to kind of set the record straight today about?
I think in terms of new business owners, I think there's this idea that we don't really have to worry about our money management until we're making money. I don't know if you hear that as well. It's sort of, and I get how it happens. It's because we have so much on our plates between all the other things we're trying to start in our business that, this kind of gets put by the wayside. But I find that if we can be very clear on where we want to go financially right from the get-go, including what kind of time it's going to take you to manage and look at and pay attention to, so you're intimate with your numbers, it can really help set you up for success with a really great foundation out of the get-go, as opposed to many people who get to say 3 to 5 years into business and then say, oh man, this is a nightmare. Now I've got to figure this out. But like you had said earlier, that might come with multiple years of cleanup, and hair tearing out and negotiating and all that kind of stuff. Whereas if we can, recognize that it's a very important pillar in our business from the get-go, and gently ease ourselves into what that internal financial management in a business really looks like, that can help a lot.
Yeah, the other thing too is when you're starting off, you're usually starting with small number of transactions. And so if you're paying attention from the ground up, all of a sudden you're growing as the business grows and it's not so scary.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Now, before I let you go, is there any final pieces of advice or anything you'd like to reiterate for the listeners to help them on their money journey as they run their businesses?
I always like to say, just remember that this doesn't have to be hard. We somehow make it more difficult than it needs to be. Not to say that, that we're all wired differently, but at the end of the day, there are just some very basic things that need to happen in your business. And if you can stick with them and do them regularly, then a lot of this anxiety and this feeling like, oh, the money stuff is really difficult goes away. So, the takeaway is just everyone can do this. It just takes a little bit of diligence and a little bit of awareness around opening ourselves up to this part of our business.
Well, I like that. I really like the positive angle. And I too agree. Everybody can do this. You just have to put your mind to it and ask for as much help as you need. And that's going to be different for every person. And so before I let you go, what are you working on now? And where can our listeners go to learn more about you, Liz?
Well, let's see. I recently launched a podcast of my own called Zen Money Monday that we had talked about in the intro. And so if you want to check that out, you can go to zenmoneymap.com/podcast, and you can see all the episodes that are there and what's coming up. I really like it because I like to talk business with people. And so it's an opportunity to just, engage in what works for various people and let people see that, there's a million different ways to build a business. Let's find the one that feels best and looks best on you. So that's going on, and you can check that out. My second book, Zen Money Map, is out in bookstores now. So if you're interested in taking it to the next level and thinking about a little bit more of the mindset work and how to map out strategy, that might be a good opportunity as well. And then obviously we talked about the first book, From Zero to Zen, which is a really great primer for, what needs to happen, when does it need to happen, and what do you not need to worry about.
Absolutely. And certainly I'll put all of those links in the show notes so people can easily find you and all of those resources, because I think it's fantastic. So thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Well, I know I'm taking away a lot of great insights. And just to recap a couple that stuck with me. Firstly, use the discomfort that you have, move through it to get to a place where you feel okay and eventually kind of happy and loving that you're all over your numbers. I think the advice you gave about being aware of where you are, what stage your business in, is really important if it's a baby, a teenager, or an adult, because there's different things that are going to go a lot with that. Certainly having a regular practice and routine around checking your account, checking your numbers so that you're following up on unpaid things, whether it's people who owe you or you owe them, and etc. And really take notice of the numbers so that nothing malicious is happening from a fraud standpoint, but also just so that you can make sure things are being done in the way that you want. And really, I loved how you said to be kind to yourself. You're in this business to have fun. You're in it to eventually make money, but you're putting something out in the world that you're really proud of. And so it's not going to be a great experience for you as you run your business if you're not being kind to yourself and enjoying all of the moments. So thank you so much, Liz.
You're welcome.
So there you have it, listeners. Liz Lajoie, author of From Zero to Zen, Secret Keys to Nurturing Your Numbers and Finding Financial Flow. Until next time, take good care and stay financially fit.
Hey, thanks for tuning in. To all you millionaires in the making out there, if you love this podcast, please subscribe on iTunes to keep your financial fitness training going. Oh, and leave us a review. And be sure to visit 2 S's, 2 T's, financialfitness.com to take your free financial fitness assessment. Find out how financially fit you really are. See you next week, young millionaires to be.